Hey, welcome to day 35 of our Journey with Jesus Bible study, where we're going through the Bible chronologically in a year using the Bible recap plan by Tara Lee Cobble. Today is day 35, and we are covering Exodus chapter 16 through 18. In chapter 16, we kind of start with one of the more well-known, probably second, third maybe, to the actual Red Sea scene, but it's manna from heaven, and it's pretty amazing. We see God providing for them even after they're grumbling and complaining, and saying in verse 3, we would that we had died in the land of it by the hand of the Lord. Words are hard. In the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full, for you have brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. And so, they hangry. We get it. We get that they're hangry, but so easily they forget the bondage that they were in. And even when Pharaoh whenever the first time that Moses and Aaron had went to them, he increased their labor and made it harder on them. And they blamed them then, saying that, if it wasn't for you, our life wouldn't be so hard. And that was in slavery. They weren't saying even before then that, the meat was so good or the food was so good. All they saw was their hardness, or the hardness of their lives there. Now they're seeing the hardness of their lives here. But we see that the Lord provides for them even amidst their grumbling. One thing in the beginning of 16, it talks about the wilderness of sin. And I know all of us are kind of like, well, isn't that appropriate? It's really sin. It's the wilderness of Sinai. So it's the wilderness that is around Mount Sinai. I thought that was interesting. I'm a Bible nerd, and I think that kind of stuff's interesting. And so in the last part of verse 4, it says, test them whether they will walk in my law or not. And so, he's telling them, for 6 days you will gather every day what you need for that day, but then for 6 days you'll gather. On the sixth day you'll gather for 2 days, because he wants them to rest on the Sabbath on the seventh day. And so this is kind of a test, kind of an introduction for them of what Sabbath is, and what his commandments are. And one thing to note with that is they are recently freed slaves. They are accustomed to working from daylight to dark 7 days a week all the time. And so for them to not work meant that they were lazy, or that they weren't getting something done that could get done. We are kind of the same way too. I know my husband wants to work all the time, and he feels if he can't work, or if he, say he's sick or something, he just feels lazy and like he's just not being productive. I think that's just innate in us. But the very fact that they were slaves and that's all they knew was work, and the Lord is so gracious and loving. He's like, no, I will provide for you, but I need you to rest. Don't do anything. I need you to rest. And then the whole point of this, you see this so much in the Exodus story of them being freed. The whole thing was that Egypt would know that I am Lord. Egypt will know that I am God. Egypt will know this. But now it's turned, then they shall know that I am the Lord, your God. He is trying to make himself personally known to them. That, like we mentioned in my last video, that he reassured them that I'm not going to do to you what I did to Israel. Here I am providing for you. I am loving on you to let you know that I am your God. I am your Yahweh. And obviously we see manna. It means, what is it? They're kind of like, what is this? But it tasted sweet. And that's the one thing that I'll say is the theme is, what was bitter, God is making sweet. What was hard, God is now making easier. And, we even see that the promised land is the land flowing with milk and honey. It's not that it literally was flowing with milk and honey, but this was going to be the land where you will be fruitful and prosper in. And later and on down, it talks about in verse 18, it says, but when they measured it with an omer, this is whenever they were gathering the manna. It says, but when they measured it with an omer, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Everyone, if they were a good gatherer, they had surplus. If they were not a good gatherer, if that wasn't something they were skilled in or whatever, there was enough left over from them for these people. And you see provision there, right? Like the one person's surplus met another person's need. And that's how we still need to live our lives, that some things that we are better at and somebody else might not be as good in that situation, or might be in a time of need. Our surplus, this is why we have to be fiscally responsible with our money, is because the Lord is blessing us, but not for us to hoard it and keep it. It's for us to give to others as needed. We don't need to be greedy. We need to be content. And then we'll see in the 10 commandments that are to come, it's like, thou shalt not steal. Well, part of that thou shalt not steal is somewhat linked to the fact that we have a surplus. If we can provide for these people, they will not need to steal. They will have everything they need met by the Lord giving us our surplus. And one thing that in a Jen Wilkins study that I was doing is that she said, in the wilderness, I am feeds them with living water and the bread of life. And I just think that's amazing, because I think it's in John, in chapter 4 and chapter 6, I think Jesus describes himself as being the living water and the bread of life. And it's no mistake that Jesus used those descriptors for himself, because on those people, on the Jewish people of that day, they would have heard that and been able to link it to this story. That's why it's so important to know our Bible, is because that gives us context of what that truly means to them and then, and it still means something for us and for now and for always. Okay, chapter 17, we see water from the rock. We see they were testing God here. They were more or less, and Moses even tells them, like, why do you test the Lord? Like, who do you think you are? Excuse me. And then towards the middle of that is in the latter part of verse 7, it says, because they tested the Lord by saying, is the Lord among us or not? It was named it was Massa and Meribah, meaning testing and quarreling. Like, they were quarreling with God. Like, who do you think you are? And then we see this is a really interesting story where Moses or Israel fights the Amalekites. And what we see here is every time Moses held up his hand with the staff, they would win. And when he lowered it, he would stop. So then why would he lower it? Well, because he was getting tired. And so then Joshua and who else? Not Joshua. Joshua is the one fighting. Aaron and Hur, H-U-R, held up his arms. And every time, so they continued to win. And I just think that's amazing. God could have snapped his fingers and they won. Just like he parted the Red Sea, it could have been that Moses held up his staff one time and they were all gone. So why did he do it the way he did? Well, God wanted to show them that, okay, I wrote this down. Let me make sure I say it right. God could have given Moses the strength on his own, but wanted to show the need for help from others. That we're a community, we're doing this together. And not to idolize Moses in a sense either, that he was the one doing this. And then we see in 14, then the Lord said to Moses, write this as a memorial in a book and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. And they beat the Amalekites here, but when they cross over there, it's not going to be so easy. And so God is telling Moses, okay, I need you to prepare Joshua, because you're not going to be there. He's going to lead them there, and he's going to need to remember this situation then, because he's going to have to trust me. And it's everything. Like, we have to remember all the things that God has done for the times of the testing and the trial. One thing to note, because I'm kind of, like I said, I'm a Bible nerd, the word hand is mentioned 7 times. Now, I have the ESV version, from verse 8 to verse 16. I challenge you to check me on that and let me know if you find it. Comment with yes or no. But it's 7 times, and we know 7 is the perfection, right? And again, it's a memory tool for the people reading this. This next part, chapter 18, is one of my personal favorites as of this year, because I never noticed this. So it says, Jethro, the priest of Midian, which is Moses' father-in-law, and the priest of Midian would have been a blending of different systems, different faiths. And so, like, it would have been like maybe a little bit of Christianity, which wasn't Christianity, you know what I mean? A little bit of some different pagan religions. And so it wasn't that Yahweh was his one true God. He might have had a polytheistic view. So he comes, they go into the tent. Moses tells him everything that has happened. And you see Jethro say in verse 10, Blessed be the Lord who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and delivered the people from the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people. Like, now I know the Lord is greater than any other God. We see Jethro's conversion written right here. And in the study I was doing, it was said, how many people do you have that you're praying for that maybe you never think that they're going to convert? They're never going to see that God is the way and the truth and the life. This shows you it's not too late. If they are still alive, you keep praying. You keep telling them, even if they resist, what God has done for you and how it's changed your life, and that he can do it for them too. And so that hit me. I know it's in a personal spot for me right now, and the Lord is showing and working on me with something. But I know I'm not alone in that. God can change hearts, and we see it happen here for Jethro. And it talks about it. We see some Genesis language here too. And Jethro is wise. Obviously, he's wise, because he's telling Moses in verse 17, Moses' father-in-law said to him, what you are doing is not good. And then he goes in verse 18, you are not able to do it alone. We see a callback to when God created man, and he said it was not good for him to be alone. This is a callback to that. And then we see what begins to be our judges, like our judging system. And if that's being, if that begins here, what do the judges need to be able to fulfill their job? Well, they need the law. They need something to go by. They need to know how to judge. Well, that's all right. So we have the judges, right? We have the good people, the hierarchy. You know, it's like all the important things go to Moses, but everything else can go down to the other judges. And what we're seeing here is God is bringing order out of chaos. Versus in the beginning, there was chaos and he brought order. And so right now there's nothing but chaos, and now he's bringing order. And it's law and order, right? So anyway, we will come back for chapter 19 through 21 tomorrow, and I hope you have a good day.